Good afternoon, welcome, and to this session on Google's Identity as a Service. So I do want to begin by thanking all of you for showing up. We know that you have lots of choices in terms of which session to attend, including possibly taking a nap after lunch. So thank you so much for showing up. My name is Karthik Lakshminarayanan. I'm a PM director on G Suite, and I'm joined by Ameet Jani. He's a product manager on the Google Cloud Platform team. And he and I will be working this talk together with all of you. And in order to show our appreciation for everyone who showed up, we will have a giveaway for you. What that is TBD. Trying to have a little bit of suspense through the talk. Okay, so before we begin, would you mind if I could get a really quick show of hands? How many of you here are using Microsoft Active Directory? Okay, almost everyone in the room. Thank you. And follow-up question, how many of you are using some cloud identity provider? Okay, pretty good a number of people are doing that. So you know this really well. You have probably a well-established identity process when it comes to your on-premise world. And you're living in this dual world of on-premise and then cloud. So you probably have a well-established identity process that works with the on-prem identity, and then you're looking to extend that to the cloud, hopefully using this identity as a service, cloud-based identity solution. And this is what we are here to talk about. The agenda here is to just walk you through how Google thinks about identity as a service. We'll walk you through our solution in this space and why we think we are different. Why should you care, right? I mean, there are other choices, obviously, in the market. We'll walk you through a demo. And we'll talk a little bit about go-to-market with partners, and finally we'll wrap it up with our closing takeaways. Okay, so let's jump right in. With identity as a service, we think about this as across these 6 categories. The first being directory, which is where you have all your entities. We think about account security. We think about your devices, particularly mobile. We think about your applications, so the idea that your end users can sign in without having to authenticate again and again, as well as provisioning, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And finally, some sort of reporting, analytics, insights into what's going on in this environment. Now, this is a 3-day conference. You're probably going to be seeing hundreds of slides. So I think there is 0 probability you're going to remember these 6 categories at the end of Friday. And so I thought, let's try a different approach. Let's try to do something that let's walk through a life cycle, and let's imagine that you have 10 new employees that are going to be starting. They need access to a few cloud-based applications. They probably have a mobile device. So, this is an audience participation exercise, so work with me on this. What is it that you think the first step you got to do if you're an admin and you have 10 new employees that are being onboarded? Yes, please. In the HR system. Fantastic answer. Thank you. That is the right answer. Of course, every answer the audience gives is correct. But that is absolutely the first step that you would have to do. There's an HR system. Maybe it's something like Workday or something else that people are using. And so these accounts need to be created. So that's where the directory pieces come in, because you've got to sync this into some Uber store, which is where the identity pieces go in. This is where the user comes in. Then the next step probably, other guesses from other people? It's okay. Come on, throw it out there. No? One more. What do you do after the first HR system? Okay, so let's just try to follow the curve here, and there's an account security piece. You typically have some sort of a username, password that's been generated. It's like a temp password you got to sign in with. And then there are possibly some devices. You may have a bring your own strategy. You may have a corporate own strategy, what have you. So you got to think about that dimension. And then you start thinking about what cloud-based applications you're going to assign or entitle to that user. And then you think through that flow. So this is typically what you're trying to do. The identity analytics piece is really trying to give you insights into the usage patterns, maybe for a variety of use cases. Some of it may be license management. You really want to try and understand you bought all these licenses. How is that actually being used in your organization, right? So that's possibly one thing. There might be interesting login patterns and alerts that you may want to think about. Maybe that's a security risk that you want to get flagged. So all of that falls under the identity analytics umbrella. So we think about identity in the context of these three platform services. The first is the piece that we just talked about, which is directory. And this is the core where you have your users, your groups, the devices that you need to get registered, and the applications that those users or devices have access to. So that's the first piece. And we believe that cloud-based identity is an extension of your on-premise solution. So it's really important that there are tools that help you sync from effectively Microsoft Active Directory, if that's what you're using, as most of you are, and being able to sync the existing entities into the cloud directory as well. So I think those tools are important. The next piece is around access management. So it's really about thinking from an end user perspective. Let's think about the single sign-on experience. If you have a Windows device, you log in, and your machine is domain joined, what have you. You have Windows integrated auth. You authenticate once, and you're able to launch these Windows applications. But what happens in the cloud world, right? And if an end user has to have different passwords that for each application, they may end up forgetting about it, or more likely, this is what end users do really, really well, which is they come up with some easy-to-remember password that meets the minimum security requirements so that they can have to type this again and again. It's very easy for them to do, right? And instead, if you have something like a single sign-on solution, you authenticate once, you can have strong password requirements and strong auth requirements and still be able to launch these applications. I remember there was an employee that worked not for me, but with me, and he was very proud. Like our company policy, this is pre-Google, he was very proud of the fact that he had detected that the employee policy was you couldn't use one of the last 10 passwords when you change your password. So he had a script, and he would, which would effectively change your password 10 times and then change it back to the same password that you had. And he was a good Samaritan, so he would walk around socializing that script if anybody else wanted to use it. So passwords end up getting in the way. Users are always smarter than your password policy. So it's really important that we think about the access management piece. And there's also policy and control. So you might have a sensitive payroll application that you may not want the user to just authenticate with a password. So you may have static policies which says, hey, if you're trying to access this sensitive application, it may be an HR application, what have you, you may need a second factor auth. You could also have dynamic policies in them because you might have some runtime evaluation, like maybe an IP boundary or some other context that needs to get evaluated at runtime. All of that falls in the access management bucket. And last but not the least, as people are moving to the cloud, or at least expanding and extending to the cloud, we believe it's also important to start thinking about standards and be very standards driven. I think folks who've not been, when you think about the on-premise model, there's lots of legacy protocols that have been there. It creates vendor lock-in, creates these implementations that become subpar over time. So we are a big believer in a standards-based approach. In fact, one of the things I want to talk about from a pain standpoint is this bucket on the top, which is provisioning, which is an overloaded term in itself. But in this context, it's about admin provisioning. So when you think about an admin and the number of users that they have to manage and the access of different applications for those users. So this starts to become unwieldy because if you have a half a dozen to a dozen applications, cloud-based applications, and you have to now manage different users in each of these applications, it becomes hard if you have to go do that. So as an example, John has access in Workday, in ServiceNow, G Suite, Box, what have you, and you keep managing that becomes pretty hard. We think a good identity solution can centralize that, so you have that one place in the identity vendor, and the identity vendor can actively manage the right user access within those applications. All driven by standards like SCIM, which is specifically used for auto provisioning. Okay, so that's sort of our view of identity as a service, and we are very serious about this thing, and we realize as we've extended and grown beyond G Suite, I think G Suite was like the first major offering that was targeted at businesses and enterprises. And we realized that there are customers who are now onboarding other Google services, GCP services that they're building, Android, Chrome, what have you. And we are announcing a standalone identity as a service solution. We are branding it as Cloud Identity. This is something that's in development right now, and we will have a beta of this next quarter. The key here is that we really want to make this super easy for organizations as they onboard onto Google services to onboard those enterprise identity using our identity as a service solution. So again, the brand is Cloud Identity. It's in development, and we'll have a beta next quarter. Here's the interesting part. How many of you here are G Suite users? Again, a quick show of hands, please. Really nice. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being a G Suite user. But here's the hidden secret in all of this. Our Cloud Identity solution is already a part of that G Suite solution. So many of you, if not all of you, have been using our identity solution to provision and manage the variety of applications that are included as part of G Suite. So the key thing that we are doing here is taking that identity that was part of G Suite. So you had to be a G Suite customer, and as people were coming on and saying, hey, I'm trying to build these GCP services, and I'm maybe not a G Suite user, then what do? I want to use your identity. So what we are doing is pulling that out. It's almost like this best kept secret. Shouldn't have been a secret. And we're pulling that out and making that a standalone identity as a service solution, which we are calling Cloud Identity. So here's the key thing. This is not something that's new that we are releasing in beta. This is something that's been used by millions of business customers already as part of G Suite. So we're just unpackaging it a little bit so you do not have to be a G Suite user. So going back, as we think about enterprise identities and we think about these enterprise services that we bring to market, with our Cloud Identity offering, you can now onboard those identities as a first step. We know that identity is now becoming front and center. It's becoming the heart and soul of these additional services that are being used in an organization. So the idea is you onboard once. You might onboard maybe not with G Suite. You onboard maybe with a GCP service you are building. Maybe you're building an application using our machine learning services that you want to roll out for a subset of your employees. So you can do that with Google Cloud Identity. And then at some point in the future, you may want to try out something else. You may want to try out Google Drive for your organization. It's the same identity solution. You don't need to roll out something new. And it's all managed through one admin control, so it's really easy to layer on and add on additional services. Okay, I hope that's appealing. Here's the other piece around Google Cloud. Like, how many of you here are existing GCP customers? Okay, good size. And evaluating GCP, maybe? Okay. So when you think about our GCP services and Google Cloud Identity, again, and in fact, we'll walk you through a demo of this, it's very easy for you to think about these as a service aspect. So GCP already has a variety of services for you. You can now onboard and sign up for Cloud Identity as another service, and it's completely driven by being self-service and online. The challenge that for those of you who are Google Cloud customers has been, to date, if you want enterprise identity, it's an offline process in the sense you typically have to call like a sales rep on the Google side, and then they put in a request. We have to do some provisioning magic at the back end, and then you get identity as a service in your Cloud Admin Console. You no longer will have to do that, and we'll show that demo shortly. One last piece, as we think about Google and Google Identity, our Cloud Identity solution also works beyond G Suite. So we do have use cases when, even today, when customers are not always using G Suite, or definitely not for all the employees in an organization. A classic example, we have this large customer. They have a lot of retail floor workers, right? So these are employees who are using mobile devices. They have access to these inventory applications built on the cloud, but not using G Suite. And they need access to these inventory applications. And so they can use Cloud Identity. So even though a subset of those users are not using G Suite, others are, they use Cloud Identity in order to manage other applications, even if they're not G Suite. So that's the idea. We have out-of-the-box support for things like single sign-on for a variety of applications. This is just a small sample here. Okay. That is identity as a service. That's Google's identity as a service. So and many of you raised your hands and said you're already looking at a cloud-based identity provider. So why worry about Google? Or why should you care? What's unique about what Google has to offer in this space? The key here is one word. If you can remember that, one thing is we are really, really proud about security. You heard this in Diane's keynote earlier today, and something that we take a lot of pride in is around security. So let's understand why, right? And let's start with the very first thing about our services. We have 7 services that actually have a monthly active user count of 1 billion users, okay? And I'll give you the first two. It's YouTube and search. Anyone want to volunteer the other names? What else has a monthly active user count of 1 billion users? Apps. Okay, not all of apps. Maps. Yes, maps, correct. That's true. Others? Gmail, that's correct. That's 4. Other 2, Maps and Gmail. Hangouts, not yet. We hope to get there. Sorry? Google Docs, not yet. We'll get there. Drive, also not there. Sorry? Chrome, yes, that is correct. Chrome is the 5th one. So YouTube, search, Maps, Chrome, Gmail. Play, number 6. One more. Probably you carry phones that run this. Android, thank you. That's 7. So what happens when you run these 7 services, the more important thing here is that we have sophisticated systems. These are all been custom built by us, and there are additional talks on security throughout the conference. So we build these custom hardened systems that go all the way from the hardware to the network to the software that runs on it in order to ensure that they have the right level of security and control. The other pieces that come with it is we use machine learning and other sophisticated techniques to detect things like attacks, right? Spoofing attacks, things like that, to keep this data really safe. And it's the same security, the same infrastructure, the same technology that we are using that powers our cloud identity as well. Here's the other key part of it, which is reliability. So our business, the money that Google makes on an annual basis, also runs on this. So if you can't, on the consumer side, so let's say log in and have like an ads account that you're managing for your organization, right? That has a significant impact to Google's business. So we go a long way to ensure that this infrastructure is up and running and protected against all kinds of attacks and threats. So when you move your data, those crown jewels that is now sitting in an on-premise directory, and you extend that to Google Cloud Identity, this is what's going to happen. The same security that we use to protect our business is now going to go to work protecting your business. So our security becomes your security when you move to our cloud identity solution. Let's talk about one more thing, which is around account security. And how many of you here are using some form of second factor auth in your organization? Anyone not using second factor auth? Okay. I think everyone's probably moved on from not just having a password-based control. And when we think about one-time use passwords, the most common ones end up being some sort of phone that people are using. They get this one-time use key. We've seen a few different problems that come up with it. The first being that, and probably the most important one, is being around cost, because when you enable a second factor auth solution that focuses on a mobile phone, the employee is asking the organization to pay for that bill, and that increases the cost. If you forget your phone or what have you, then you now have this weird thing of how do I log in, etc. So there's a problem with that. There are other issues like SMS connectivity and so on. But probably from a usability standpoint, the thing that happens is every time you got to type in this key, whether it's from a VPN-based, one of those keys, or whether it is from your one-time password. And Verizon had this really interesting data point where they did this survey, and they found that I think it was about 75%, 79%, something like that, a really high number, that the attacks actually happen because existing accounts, the existing employees, their accounts get compromised, and then that's how they get in. So it's not really some hacker who's able to break through into your system. It's an employee that gets phished, and then it's that employee's account masquerading around and causing all kind of havoc in your system. So there's a fundamental problem because when you get a key that's valid for 5 minutes, that key can be read, it's human readable, and it can be phished, right? So that's a key problem. So something that Google worked on, working with the FIDO Alliance, and again, contributing back to that open standards and open source community, is this thing which we call security keys. And it's something that you may have heard of if you're a G Suite enterprise customer. It's included in that. But these security keys are interesting. All of you are going to get one of these when you walk out today. This is something that you can has a couple of ways. You put it into a USB key, like those 2 keys on the left and the right. And then the one in the middle is a Bluetooth-enabled, Bluetooth low-energy-enabled key, so it works with your phone as well. Here's a key difference, okay, which is it's an encrypted signal. So even if you are phished, instead of going to google.com, you went to goggle.com, and you are typing your password in, even if somebody gets that password, your signal is completely encrypted, so the second factor. So that person who phished you is not going to do much with that key because Google's going to look for not just the password, but the whole second key that's sent through an encrypted signal, and that token's not going to be valid, and hence this auth attempt is going to be declined. In fact, interesting story that I have been at Google and I have never changed my actual password. It's what I got on my first day. I had to change it based on the temp password I got. I've never changed my password. I do not VPN in from anywhere. I can work from a kiosk like this. And I'm a director at Google, so I get access to a fair amount of sensitive data, employee data, perf data, things like that. And I'm not asked to change my password because every time I log in, I have this security key. So Google runs our business on this security, and these keys are now available for you. Each and every one of you is going to get one of these keys when you walk out later today. Please do try it out if you like the experience, and consider rolling this out more broadly in your organization. So that's about account security. One more thing is that these keys are available. You can buy them on Amazon or what have you. And I'm going to put this up here. We'll try to figure out if we can keep this up a little bit later. But there's like a coupon code you get between 40 to 50% off, depending on which key code, which one you actually go for. I think the one on the top is 40% off. The one below is 50. So please do take a look. There's a there's a coupon there, and do try it out. Okay, so that's what we think we are better at, and this is why we think you should consider us for your cloud identity solutions. So with that, we're going to dive into how cloud identity is going to help with your GCP onboarding use cases. So for that, I'm going to please invite again Ameet Jani, and he's going to walk you through this section. Welcome, Ameet.
Thank you, Karthik. Hi, everybody. I'm Ameet. I'm a product manager on the Google Cloud side. And I saw some hands go up when Karthik asked how many of you are on Google Cloud. Let me ask a more detailed question. How many of you suffered through our onboarding process to get your enterprise on board? All right, well, then I've got great news we should be excited about today. At least I'm excited about it, because I'll stop getting angry phone calls. This is the idea that we're now putting identity front and center in your sign-up process, right? As you go on board, let me walk you through a typical customer journey. I come in, I'm a customer, I'm using my Gmail account to test out Google Cloud. I like what I see, I love it, in fact, and I want to start moving my enterprise there. I can now, instead of this tedious process of some back-end phone call, I can right front and center start to click and onboard my enterprise, as it were. I can start with my DevOps, I can include the security operations people, and eventually I can bring my entire enterprise on board without any long delay in process and manual provisioning thing that needs to occur. So I'm going to walk through a demo. Before I do, I think it's as a Google Cloud customer, you'll find that identity is really the pivot point around which you make your access management decisions. There's no surprise there. It is, for those of you who are familiar with our cloud IAM story, it is the I in IAM, right? Who are the security principals? Who are the users and groups that I'm allowing? And what are the access that I'm going to give those people? And you have rich policies on-prem today, right? You have workflows and users, and you've taken the time to assign users to groups and then assign those groups to roles so that you can control access. You just want to naturally extend that into the cloud, and that is exactly the direction we're moving to with all of this. So we do that just before I jump to the demo. We do this in a very simplified way. We talked about who, right? You have these users in some on-prem system. Now with this identity as a IDaaS system, you can now synchronize everybody or federate everybody to Google Cloud. You can start to assign them roles. Roles are just obviously a collection of permissions. So let's walk through an actual example. I'm a network administrator. I want to be able to configure firewalls. I'm part of the network administrator group. You just assign that custom role to those users or to that group. And there's a double icon there. But you get the sense that now you can control access to the VMs they can access, the firewalls that they can set up, or other cloud resources. You can even start to use those same identities and groups and roles to control access to the applications themselves. I've lift and shifted an SAP system to the cloud. I can now say, if you're a member of the finance group, you should have access, otherwise you shouldn't. Those are the rich things you can start to do as you move to the identity system. If we could switch computers, I wanted to run through. Can you guys see my screen? No. If you could see it, you'd be amazed. There we go. So I was going to do this live, and then all week I was getting this passive-aggressive comment from my boss. He's like, "Oh, you're going to do it live on a conference wireless." So I kind of chickened out at the end there, and I recorded it. It is real, but it's recorded here. So this is my actual browser. You'll see I'm going to log into Pantheon, or excuse me, Cloud Console. I log into Cloud Console here. You'll see it says, this is Ameet at Gmail. I'm here. I'm going to go play with I love what I see here. I go to IAM and admin. The first thing you'll see is, and this is actually the exciting part, front and center identity starts to show up there, right? No more figuring out what that means and what's going on. We try to make it very easy to say, A, you can sign up for identity. B, if you don't know what identity is or what it means, you missed this talk, you can find out the documentation, or you can go jump right into user management if you've already done all this, right? The second thing I want to point out for those of you who walk through our identity onboarding flow, I'm now in my sign-up flow. I'm going to walk this in 5 minutes. Of course, I was going to walk through it in 5 minutes. You'll notice, there it is, that it's branded Google Cloud. So as Karthik was saying, this is the same identity system for everybody, for all Google properties. But we're trying to make this a very native journey for those of you who are in cloud, right? You're in cloud, you're used to seeing what you see here, or not seeing, I guess, all the stuff that's here. Why don't I go through it quickly so we don't lose it again? We'll walk through. You're going through the sign-up flow here. You can see I'm signing up myself as my user identity. And this is an example. I have a domain I call Zotkicks. I sign up Zotkicks. I just need to verify that I own that domain. So this is the domain I'm going to be using. I'm using a subdomain in this example. And then per best practice, I'm going to pause here because you missed the beginning part. I'm signing up a group of administrators to gain access to all this, right? I'm creating some temporary password, and then I'm going to walk through and verify who I am. There's a robot sign that goes on here. You're enhancing the Google machine learning algorithm by doing all this. I don't want any of the spam that comes with it. I agree to the terms. The terms basically say I can send you spam email. And then now you're off to the races, right? You're signing up for this new account. So the next thing you'll notice, now you're on you've done step one here. I'll pause it for a second. You can see you've set up the cloud identity. You'll notice the branding is still cloud identity, so you're not confused and lost in this G Suite and Google Cloud world. So now the second part of this three-step process is I need to verify that in fact, my corporation owns this domain. So nobody should be able to come and claim that you own that domain if they don't, right? So I've done the first step. I'm going to jump into the domain verification step. There's a couple of things I want to point out here in all of this. First is, and I'll walk through an example here. There are 2 or 3 ways to verify your domain. The first one is you can add a tag to your main HTML page. Most of you don't want to do that. I'm going to walk through in this demo the example of how most of our customers do it. I'm just going to edit the DNS registry. So here I come in. You see that I can add a text, a value to a text record in my DNS to prove that I own the domain. So here's an example where I'm going to do it for Zotkicks. For this subdomain, this is the text value, right? I'm able to just copy it and then jump into my DNS registry. So here's what I'm doing in the demo here, jumping into my DNS registry. I want to pause here for a second. Because this is Google, I'm using Google domains. You can use any of the domain providers you have. I'm now in my DNS configuration setting, which is the middle one there, right? So I'm now going to go and validate that I do, in fact, own Zotkicks to Google. So I'm going to scroll down to not registered host, but I'm going to come down to my custom resource. This is my subdomain. I'm going to select the text value, the TXT value. Just a simple copy and paste. Add. And then we're off to the races, right? So now you're seeing this updates the DNS within a minute. So now that I've done that, I can come in here and say, yes, I've done what you wanted me to do. I set up the DNS, set up the text verification record, I verify the domain. The sign-up process goes through and makes sure that you, in fact, did update the domain, that you are who you say you are. And congratulations, you are now onboarded. Your enterprise is now onboarded. Now, I'm going to walk through a flow here where I'm going to go and create a secondary user. We call it the hit by the bus problem. If the admin gets hit by a bus, anybody else should not be locked out from there. But there are multiple ways to synchronize your identities. Many of you have hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of users that will need access to these resources, and you don't want to manually add them this way, right? So we have these sync tools and federated tools where you can synchronize your on-prem identities to the cloud. But in this example, I'm creating just a backup of somebody else who can access. So in this case, Ford Prefect can log in. I send him a little standard form email, so that he'll have his email address. He'll have the new username and password. Next. Okay, so I'm set up. And now I've created somebody else who can access. And now I want to log in as that domain user that I had. No more Ameet at Gmail. I want to be Ameet at zotkicks.com. I'm automatically logged in here. So you see I clicked on it. And now I'm in a domain-controlled Google Cloud environment, right? This is company-owned. I need to set up for company billing. No more rogue projects. No more trying to figure out what's out there in my name. It's all controlled here simply. This is where I conclude the demo, but this is in essence where we say, now you can start creating projects and set up your billing account and set up all your roles. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand it back to Karthik. But that's in essence the power of the identity stuff that we're introducing. You don't have to be a G Suite user anymore. Now you're just a Google Cloud user, and you can still walk through the same flow that everybody else does. All right, thanks, Karthik.
Great. Thank you so much, Ameet. I hope that was helpful, and I hope that showed how easy it is to just sign up for identity as a service for your organization. And it's something, again, it's in beta early next quarter, and we hope that you like using it. And this is not tied to G Suite or anything like that. You can just sign up for Google's cloud identity. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about go-to-market. So recall again from a demo and from an agenda standpoint, we wanted to talk about what is identity as a service, what's Google's solution in this space. We talked about our differentiators, which is security, and now we want to talk about how you think about this from a go-to-market standpoint. Because like we were saying at the beginning, there is an on-premise world, and this is that well-managed, well-oiled machine that you're running. Now you're extending it and bringing cloud identity into your organization. So as you start to do that, it's important to think about these hybrid use cases. And what Google does is we support these web standards and modern standards around SAML and OAuth and OIDC. What we don't have out of the box is support for these legacy or identity 1.0 protocols like Kerberos and WSFed. But this is where we have partnered closely with, we have these two partners, Ping and Okta, and we have them as part of our Recommended for Work program. And the idea being that you use these partners as an ID bridge. So the idea being we could authenticate, treat Ping and Okta as an app, and that in turn takes care of your existing cloud on-premise use cases, right? So we can do the cloud use cases, and the existing on-premise use cases, you can partner with somebody like a Ping and Okta, and we have a great relationship with them. So very quickly, why consider this? Because really it's a get the best of both worlds kind of scenario, right? We think that if you believe in our value prop and our promise that our security is going to do more to protect your directory in the cloud, then please go with us as that cloud identity as your directory, and use that to protect your crown jewels for those cloud-based use cases, and use the partners as an ID bridge in order to address some of your more complex use cases and some of your hybrid use cases, okay? Don't just take my word for it. We actually have an additional speaker that we didn't introduce up front, and this is from Netflix. And it's my pleasure to introduce Tejas Dharamshi. He is a senior security software engineer. He works on Netflix cloud security. So please please share more with us about how you're using Google Cloud Identity. And I think it's fascinating to see how a forward-thinking customer is using us to serve their mission-critical needs. And so, but to hear more about it, please welcome Tejas.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Tejas.
So yeah, so before we get into learning like what identity and like how Netflix deals with identity, let's first understand like what it means to be in like a Netflix ecosystem, right? So we have apps, studios apps basically, which manage the entire life cycle of a production, right? From an inception to PR to marketing to localization to encoding, name it, right? So entire end-to-end workflow, we have a suite of applications which do that. Then we have engineering applications which manage the entire deployment pipeline to our big data platform to other developer tools. So a whole bunch of engineering apps. And we have corporate applications. So we are talking about more than 500 such applications. So in such varied set of apps, what you don't want is everyone going and building their own identity directory and managing authentication, session management, and other aspects. It's a huge risk, especially for a firm like Netflix, right? So we definitely don't want to do this. What we want is a single identity directory. This is where like cloud identity offering from Google comes into picture. And at the same time, don't confuse people, right? Don't confuse with varied login experience. A single login experience. That's another key aspect. And also, we don't want everyone to just keep logging in all the time to access so many applications. We want single sign-on. And the last piece, which is key to us, is adaptive security. How can we extend like the security model and add Netflix juice in there, right? So adaptive security is another key aspect. So this leads to the birth of Netflix Identity. We call it Meechum. I hope everyone is aware of the character Meechum from House of Cards. So that's where the name comes from. So the heart to our identity is our infrastructure. So we have a highly scalable, active, multi-region infrastructure on AWS. That's where our identity infrastructure runs off. We use Google, as Karthik was mentioning in one of the slides, we use Google as the identity directory as well as auth provider. And we use Ping as the broker. Ping actually helps us add that last piece which we were talking about as the custom like adaptive security that we were talking about, right? So I'm going to go more in detail about that, but these are the core aspects about Netflix Identity. So the cloud identity offering from Google, it provides some key aspects. Custom user schema. So based on your organization requirements, you can define your own custom schema and mark attributes that are public, which means anyone can access, or admin attributes. In this particular case, I'm talking about like hire date or employee type or any other like sensitive information. And the second thing that it actually helps us is automate the entire user lifecycle. So admin SDK gives you APIs to actually do that. So in our case, user gets created in Workday, gets synced to the identity directory, and that's how, and even the deprovisioning aspect. Next aspect is groups. So groups, the way we treat groups at Netflix is like we use groups as a way of ACLing in applications. Either developers use groups as a way to ACL in their application, or admin created groups to ACL like very sensitive applications. Another aspect that the cloud identity offering provides us is basically the support of isolation, right? So you can isolate people and groups in their own domains. You can create subdomains, but the way we want to go about that is to have their own distinct domains. So in our case, we have employees in their own domain, contractors, customer service, DVD, like everyone in their own domains. And the OpenID Connect user info endpoint can be customized now, right? So you can create your own user information which you want to expose as part of the OpenID Connect standard, right? So let's take the classic example of an OpenID Connect like authentication workflow, right? A user goes to one of these engineering applications. They don't have a valid Meechum session, they get redirected to Meechum. Further down, like there's no valid Google session, gets redirected to Google, and that's where the unified login experience comes into picture, right? In addition to that, based on risk analysis carried out by Google, you might be presented by the second factor. On everything successful, an access token and an ID token gets generated. Classic authentication cycle, and that's the first piece. On successful authentication, apps can query user information and do ACLing around that, or do some custom stuff around that, right? So this is a sample user info endpoint exposing public attributes as well as the groups that I'm part of. So now this helps us check 3 boxes, right? So now we have Google, or the cloud identity offering, being the central ID or the identity directory. We have unified login experience, and we have added single sign-on. So does that mean like we call it a day and we're happy with that? How can we take this to the next step? And this is where the adaptive authentication comes into picture. So me as a user, I have access to these. What was that? So me as a user, can I access pretty much any app that we have in a suite of applications? Probably not a good idea, right? So that's where adaptive authentication comes into picture. And the key factors to that are role-based access control, what sort of a pattern, access pattern, me as a user has for these varied set of applications. And finally, anomaly detection. I'm going to dive into each of these aspects in a bit, but these are the core constructs around our adaptive authentication. So the first one is role-based access control. So now we have every user in their own Google domain. We have users and we have groups. And remember, user meaning they have their own custom schema. So how can we leverage that? So these attributes are available, and they are available to every developer who's building an app within Netflix. And we believe in freedom and responsibility. So these attributes are available to them, and they use self-service tools to go and say that, oh, I want to enable all Netflix employees for my application or contractors. And further down, I can say that which groups and users I want to allow access to. The next step to this is also, can we use this user schema and say that, hey, everyone in this organization has access, so that I don't have to worry about new people joining or people leaving. Everyone will have access. So that's the first step. The next step is access pattern, right? So we have users now who have access based on roles, but my account can be compromised, or my device gets stolen. There can be varied scenarios. So we need to figure out what is normal and what is not normal from a user's perspective, right? So Tejas accessing an engineering application versus Tejas all of a sudden going to a financial application or to a production suite of applications, what is normal? So from Meechum, all this information gets streamed and logged into our centralized logging infrastructure. From there, data aggregation happens, and a user profile is built. So user profile meaning from where the user is accessing, which app user is accessing, when is he accessing, at what frequency is the user accessing the application. So based on that, a user profile is basically built. Now we have the profile. How do we define policies? Again, we have self-service tools to create a policy for every app, for every user, and define a whole bunch of metrics around that. So now we have policy, and we have a user profile. How can we gel these two things together during the authentication? So in Meechum, we have another adapter that kicks in, which is an access pattern adapter, which takes a peek into these user profile and policies. And if something unusual is detected, a second factor is sent to the end user using Duo. And only after confirmation is a user allowed access. So this is where, in addition to Google's second factor, based on our risk analysis, we send out a second factor to the end user using Duo security. And the last piece being anomaly detection. Again, like from the information that is getting logged into our logging infrastructure, we figure out whether things are normal or there's any anomaly in your access pattern. Maybe you are trying to access the same app at the same time from multiple devices. Is that really normal? May not be, right? So in that case, an email is sent out to the end user. Only after confirmation on that email will the access be granted to that end user. So this is what is Netflix identity and, in general, adaptive authentication. And now we have all 4 checkboxes checked. So this is what it means. So just to summarize, the 4 pillars, AWS is where our entire infrastructure is. Google being the primary identity directory as well as auth provider, and Ping being our ID broker, which helps us get to adaptive authentication. Thank you. Thanks, Karthik.
Thank you so much. We thought it'll be helpful to just, forget all the marketing and the talk high level. We thought it'll be helpful to just walk you through an actual customer, how they're using us as part of their critical infrastructure and as part of their productivity and every day-to-day business. I think the other piece, just to quickly reiterate, I think Netflix has been a great G Suite customer, and that's how they've been able to run cloud identity. And just to reiterate, now we'll have this as a standalone service. That'll be the beta that'll go out next quarter. So thanks again. We hope that that was useful. So we are close to the end. We talked about our identity solution. We talked about our differentiators. We talked about how we could go to market with partners, and then the Netflix case study. One thing I do want to bring up, it's near and dear to my heart, as I talk to customers and as I talk to people, the question that always comes up is people do think Google's tech is pretty good. That's not the issue. People do worry about what does it mean when my stuff is running on Google. And they always worry whether it is because of FUD created by the competition or whether it's real concerns. We acknowledge that perception is reality. The fact that they worry, is this data something that Google is now going to mine, start showing ads around it? Absolutely not the case, right? Please do read our terms of service. Our terms of service for enterprise use cases is different, and we have a different toss for consumer. We do not, your data is your data, right? We are not here to show ads on it, so please, that is not the case. Please read the terms of service, and you'll see exactly how we plan or how we use the data or not. So that's the first thing, no ads. If you have to remember one thing, no, we don't use it for ads, okay? So that's one. The second is about compliance and regulatory needs. So we recognize that most of you here probably have instances and employees all around the world. Laws are different in different countries, and you have to meet those local laws. So we work very, very hard, and we have a ton of certifications to show that we are compliant with all laws, all local laws, wherever you may be operating. So that's the second piece about compliance and regulatory needs. And then the third piece that comes up, which is there's always technology, but we've also perfected, and we continue to be extremely open. There's actually a link that I know you can't see it, but I'm happy to share that after the talk. But we are publicly documenting everything that we do, not just from a tech standpoint, but also from a process standpoint. Like I mentioned previously, our data centers are custom built all the way from the hardware to the network to the software. And they're hardened systems, right? But more importantly, what happens to employees, and what are the access policies for a Google employee that's working in our data center? So it's publicly documented. We have background checks. We have independent audits. So please do go through that as well if you're interested, and everything is available on our website. So it's really important that we think not just from a tech standpoint, but also from a process standpoint. We think this is a pretty hardened system. And I really cannot go in and just start looking for data. Everything is logged. I have to actually get permission. I have to have justification, all those kinds of things. And I actually can't access data just because I'm a Google employee. So please do read up on that. Anytime somebody says something to the effect that we are using your data for other reasons, please do realize that is not the case, and please do check up on where we are at online. I'm happy to have a conversation offline as well. Okay, so this is my last slide, and we think about Google's IDaaS solution. At least we think that we can bring our security to run your business critical cases. So now our security is at work becoming your security. That's the key thing. Second, you saw this, which is everything we do is open and standards based. In fact, the enterprise security keys that we talked about, we worked together with the FIDO Alliance, and we helped create that standard. And that's the standard that anybody is open to using and implementing, right? So we're not here to keep our innovation to ourselves, but we want to contribute back for the greater good of the community. The third is, you saw Ameet's demo, which is 100% self-service. So those of you who are in the audience that have been using our Google Cloud Platform, and you've had to, unfortunately, live with some of the pain of an offline sign-up and offline provisioning, mainly taking days before you can be up and running. We now have 100% self-service. And it is not tied to G Suite, right? You can use it for your other G Suite users if you want. That is a problem as well. So now you can do that. You can use it for GCP. And this will just extend, because it is the same identity. if you're thinking of Chromebooks or other Google services. That's number 3. And the 4th is your trust is important to us. So we do a variety of things, including meeting local laws, but also making sure that we are very transparent about our data access policies and what have you. So you understand how we treat your data if you do move to Google Cloud Identity.